Welcome, True Believer readers, to another episode of Let's Read Spider-Man. And here is a man who would never throw himself out a window, my acrobic friend, Eddie. How are you today, Eddie?
I'm doing great. Throwing myself out a window, that would not result in anything good for me. So, certainly not, James B.
Yeah, I knew you wouldn't do that. I mean, who would ever do that? Well, we'll find out today because we're going to talk about Part 2 of the Prowler. Although, Eddie, on page 1, it does actually say right away, this tale was originally planned as part of a 3-part epic, but since we promised to eliminate our continued stories, we've labored heroically to conclude it in this issue. Just thought you'd like to know. So in a way, Eddie, this is like part 2 and 3. It's like having one extra bonus issue today.
Yeah, I was happy to see this. It's been a little light in some of these books. But James B., we are also going to have a bonus, but a bonus person. That's right. Today we have a guest introducing our Twitter friend, Steve. We are epically excited to have you join us. How's it going, Steve?
I'm doing great.
Tell us about your Spider-Man comic knowledge and why you're here, Steve.
Well, I decided to tell you guys how great you were on Twitter, and here I am now as a guest. 65 issues of Amazing Spider-Man later.
Yeah, it's a problem. I admit, if somebody says they like us, Eddie, I kind of always invite them on the show.
It's just a gentle stroke of the egos. Special guest, everybody. That's all it takes.
But Steve, I got a question. You're reading all these Spider-Man books. Just in general, what did you think of Spider-Man, like, so far just reading it?
I really just love reading all these early Spider-Man comics. They're so good. It's for the first time, too, but it got a little bit of a drag when it got to the tablet story. That's when it was kind of like I maybe have read too many Spider-Man comics in a row and was second-guessing everything, and nothing was making sense anymore. Then there was this tablet.
Eddie, this is for you, Eddie. Go ahead.
I am right there with you, Steve. I couldn't stand the tablet.
My God, it went on for 8 issues.
This isn't going to go on for 8 issues. This Prowler is going to be wrapped up in 2, right, Eddie?
Yes, I'm very glad. And speaking of the Prowler, let me go right into issue 79 to Prowl no more. We open with a bungled robbery attempt and the Prowler grappling to understand how and why Peter threw himself out the Daily Bugle window when J. Jonah Jameson walks in and accuses him of murdering Peter. The Prowler flees straight into Spidey's hands, where they do battle until Spidey is gassed. A gas attack again, everyone. Come on, Spidey. And the Prowler escapes.
Steve, did you see J. Jonah Jameson's reaction to Peter's, quote-unquote death? There's one panel where he says, "You murdered the kid!" And it's followed quickly in the next panel by, "At least the rotten killer didn't get any of my money." Should J. Jonah Jameson have been, more sad that Peter fell out the window and presumed dead? Or should he have been less sad? I mean, he gave him one panel of concern and then he was onto the money. Based on what you've read in the last 79 issues and the 65 you read this month, what do you think?
I think that's very on par for JJ. It's really, a normal person would have been a little more concerned, but it's Jonah Jameson, and he only cares about his money.
You think one panel is probably about the appropriate amount for J. Jonah Jameson? Okay, he does have a heart of gold, Eddie.
He's told us so many times. I know we recently, we got to thank Steve for talking about our top 5 villains, and this is why J. Jonah is my top villain, because he is just the worst. I hate this guy. He's worried about his cash and not his employee as always.
He did have one panel of "you murdered the kid," although you could argue that was more of him just accusing somebody else of murder more than he was concerned about Peter, right?
That's right. I interpreted that as that's my next headline. He's already anticipating his newspaper the next day by saying that headline.
Speaking of being concerned, I noticed that Spider-Man could tell that the Prowler was young from the way he talked during the fight, I'm assuming through his mask. Does Spider-Man's mask have a different ability to make him sound older, or does Peter consider himself older? Because he's like, "Oh, this guy's just a kid. I can tell by his voice." What do you guys think? Is Peter Parker old enough that he doesn't have a young man's voice anymore? Is that the difference here?
It sounded like a stretch for him to just kind of guess that he was youthful. I don't know if he uses spider sense or something, but I don't know. I don't know how you can really find out someone's youth. He's
Yeah,
not Daredevil.
I agree. That's what I thought. It was a stretch too, and I think the reason that he realizes he sounds young is going to pay off in about 16 pages, right?
It has to.
Yeah, so we'll find out more about that. Last time we were going over the summary, there was some kind of gas attack going on here. Is that what you said, Eddie?
That's right. Peter, groggy from the gas, and Hobie, distraught at being a murderer, both head home, where Hobie concludes he must fight Spidey because it's all Spidey's fault.
Eddie, I know you do a great job in the summary, so that way there everybody can feel like instead of reading the book that you've summarized it and they can picture the whole storyline and you summarize it and eliminating all the stuff we don't care about. But I believe that the Prowler's concern here is if he captures Spider-Man, that then he can prove that murdering Peter was an accident. So he's out to capture Spider-Man so the public will say, oh, look, he took this menace off the streets. That's why he's doing it. He's not mad at Spider-Man for the death of Peter Parker. He's just going to capture Spider-Man to prove he's a good guy.
You know, I think you're right, James B. It was my inner J. Jonah Jameson. Let me wrap it up here for you guys. The next day, Peter gives Gwen the cold shoulder. That night, Spidey bumps into the Prowler, committing a crime. They do battle, and this time, Spidey remembered his gas mask. Eventually, Spidey gets the better of the Prowler, and when he unmasks him, he sees a confused young man just like himself. Hobie and Spidey have a heart-to-heart talk, and in the end, Spidey lets Hobie go free.
Eddie, do you think Spidey's judgment is good enough to let the Prowler go?
I had to think about this for quite a while because it's a big move on Spidey's part, in my opinion. The Prowler is a criminal. He's committed several crimes, and he up to this point he's pretty much wrapped up every villain that he's come across. But I think he really does see himself as the Prowler, and I think not only does he see himself as the Prowler, but as I've said before, I think there's very little that kept Spidey from being a villain himself. Like Aunt May is really one of the only things early on we see it that prevents him from becoming a criminal himself. So like. I think this is okay, but I don't know if I trust Spidey's judgment most of the time for other things. You guys?
I think it was good enough to let him go, because Prowler's worst crime was throwing Peter out of the window, but Spider-Man knows that didn't really happen, and I guess all Prowler really did was a little robbery, but he never really got away with anything. I think Spider-Man knows he's a good guy after that heart-to-heart they had.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I did reread it because I think when I finished the book, I thought, what's he doing? And then on the reread, I thought it was fine to let him go. Although he does say he didn't hurt anyone he broke a bunch of windows. He did kick Spider-Man a bunch of times, but you should have said he didn't hurt anyone besides me. But yeah, it's like you said, he gave him a heart-to-heart, and I'm sure Peter saw a youth who he knew it was a youth from his voice earlier that was really misguided and, made some bad decisions. And Peter probably saw a little bit of himself in there with the poor decisions he made when he first found himself in a situation with his costume and Uncle Ben and all that stuff. And he probably thought, I'll cut this guy some slack. So it didn't bother me in the end either. Eddie, is this a good time to squeeze in a sponsor?
Always a good time for a sponsor, James B.
Eddie, are you worried about people stealing from you? I mean, you work hard all day long, and then you like to buy things so you can enjoy your life, and then someone comes along and takes those things that don't belong to them. Maybe they damage your property taking it, and you don't want that to happen. You need to take care of that problem, right, Eddie?
Well, yeah, I don't want that to happen, but I'm not too worried about this. Go on, James B.
Well, now there is a way you can deal with these worrisome problems that you're constantly worried about, Eddie. It's the Spider-Man Security Guard Company. That's right. They will train a security guard. Now, let me be clear. This is not Spider-Man, okay? He's just in name. But they'll train someone to come to your home or place of business, and if anyone breaks a window or steals from you or throws someone out of a window, the Spider-Man Security Guard Company will deal with it. Be assured justice will be served. Of course, at the Spider-Man Security Guard Company, there are some exceptions. So if the person wanted to help people but no one seemed to care, Spider-Man security guard personnel are trained to let those people go, Eddie, if no one gets hurt, or just kicked in the face. Employees will probably also let people go if there's an opportunity for the person to go back to their girlfriend, since that's, quote, really where it's at, close quote. The employees of the Spider-Man security company will probably let them go if they're not too old. I mean, if they're young, they're probably going to let them go. Look, it really depends on if they have a good sob story. Let's just be clear. So don't waste time with real police officers or real security guards. Have the Spider-Man security guard company send someone to help you out. Note, the Spider-Man security guard company employees also work during the day as life coaches and social workers. So they're there for guidance if you need that as well. You can find them on Instagram at sscg.com. SpiderManSecurityCompany.com is fully insured. So Eddie, are you ready to hire someone like that today?
I gotta say, I'm very happy that there is a moral training for these security guards and that they are life coaches too. That's a great combination, I think, for law enforcement and security guards. But I don't know if I really have a need for this, James B. I'm not sure.
So you're saying that you don't care about your stuff or people throwing your family out a window or something? Is that what I'm hearing? Steve, can you explain the value of the Spider-Man security company to Eddie?
I think this is great because Spider-Man can't be everywhere, He's always in the city, Manhattan, but what about the suburbs, New Jersey and everything? He can't be everywhere. So this is just like having your own personal Spider-Man to just watch your stuff. It's great.
Steve might have convinced me here. It's like an extension of Spider-Man outside of his normal boundaries.
That's right. He's out there letting people who would be thwarting you and harming you, letting them go with an important talk.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Anything else we want to talk about in this issue, gentlemen?
I think Gwen and Peter deserve a little more. Steve, did you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, Peter and Gwen only interacted for like one full page, if that, for only 4 panels. And I think it was their first fight ever where Peter tells her off and is jealous about Flash. And he tells her to go run away with Flash and won't be at his expense anymore. He's fed up with her, I guess. It's very sad.
Yeah, I'm surprised she's not crying. She did have the permanent tear for seems like the entire Petrified Tablet saga, and she's not crying here, but she's just got her mouth open in shock for 3 panels. Eddie, anything else you want to say about that, or that's it? Did Steve cover it?
I think Peter has a real problem with not talking out his problems with whoever he has a problem with. We've seen it so many times with the Human Torch. We've seen it with Harry. Come on, Peter, just slow down for a minute and why don't you talk to Gwen? But nope.
One thing we didn't talk about is this actual issue. Did we like this issue 79 with the Prowler and everything? I'll bring 78 into it as a 2-parter if you don't mind, but did you like it?
I really liked it. I liked the Prowler. I knew about the Prowler from the animated series, and of course in Spider-Verse it was a little different, but this was pretty on point to the animated series Prowler that I'm familiar with, and I really liked that he was just like a window washer, and he had all these gadgets ready, and it just made him to a supervillain. And even this issue I really liked, besides so much fighting, but I thought it was pretty good. I like the Prowler. I can't wait to see, I want to see him team up with Spider-Man going forward.
Eddie?
That would be really cool. I don't know the future super well, but I did like this. I like this issue too. I know we didn't talk about the goofy film buying, right? When he essentially breaks into a drugstore or whatever, and this is the second time he's used his web to or third time actually to put some money towards someone or pick it up from the sewer. That was I didn't even mention it by summer we talk about it, but this goofy part I kind of enjoy. And after the tablet saga, this is so much better, right, Steve?
Oh yes. Oh my God. That's what I was after the lizard fight was kind of just 2 issues of fighting, and then this really feels like, all right, we're past the tablet, we're going back to Amazing Spider-Man as you know it. Random villain that you feel sorry for, Spider-Man fights. It's great.
I think I agree with your points that this is a kind of villain that will, help out Spider-Man in the future. It was much more enjoyable than the Petrified Tablet saga. I think it lacks, like, I know we talked to Eddie. One of our guests was talking about the backgrounds are being drawn like really. Was that Travis that they were talking about? They were saving backgrounds by not drawing and rushing the issues along. Remember that storyline?
Yeah, that was the first one where like, yeah,
I think Travis was
'cause
telling
I
us
got
that.
done with it.
So
He was talking about how they used bigger panels,
right, but
so they didn't.
what they're also doing.
Oh, it's how it's DC's fault?
Yes, it's DC's
It's all
fault.
DC's
Good
fault.
callback. But
Yes.
what they're also doing here is they're also not covering the other storylines. They're like, don't worry about Aunt May. She's just not in this issue. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
don't worry about Harry. He's just not appearing in this issue. And that's not what we're used to. I'm used to, we have enough panels that we can, where is the gratuitous Ned and Betty one panel? Where they're in the background saying, there goes JJ again, or something like that. There's none of that, right?
Right. It's true. It doesn't like have a lot of story again.
There was panels with J. Jonah Jameson not even smoking a cigar, Eddie. I don't know if you saw those. Super lazy.
It's fallen out of his mouth so many times now too. His cigar is always fallen out of his mouth now.
We mentioned that you mentioned earlier, Steve had asked us the question that we used in episode 49, which was our top 5 villains. That Steve had proposed 2 different questions, and I said, this is a great question. Why don't you come on and do your second question, which is our 3 best supporting characters. And maybe the Human Torch and Harry and Gwen will be on your lists. But do you guys have a list prepared of your top 3 supporting characters?
I do.
Yes, I'm prepared.
All right. So for the best supporting characters, the criteria is just up in the air. It could be your favorite character. It could be someone you think is important to Spider-Man. It could be someone who's just well written. Anything you want. It was our decision to go wherever we wanted. So for my number 3, I have someone who makes 26 appearances. Their first appearance is Amazing Spider-Man 15. And the most important thing that Anna Watson does is takes Aunt May off Peter Parker's hands and introduces him to Mary Jane Watson. And I think Anna Watson is a key factor that we forget about, because having someone to watch over Aunt May really makes it nice for Peter. And of course, bringing MJ into the fold and, giving her a motherly figure is also a factor out there. So I'd be surprised if you guys picked up on her, but I think that Anna Watson is my number 3. Steve, who did you have at your number 3?
Number 3, I have Robbie Robertson. He loves Peter. He's a really good guy. He paid Peter what he's actually worth, and he supports Spidey. So he's a great supporting character just for those things, and that one issue, just for putting a positive headline for Spider-Man and giving Peter the money that he deserves for the picture he takes.
That is a really valid point, Steve. I gotta appreciate Peter finally getting paid properly. I actually had Betty Brant. It was an unexpected one. There's a lot of ties for third for me, but she's involved in so many different aspects of Peter Parker and Spider-Man's life, and she's around for a really long time, and she directs several stories in several different issues. And although she kind of perpetually has a sad face towards the end of her heavy involvement with Spider-Man and Peter, I really like how she kind of is in both Spider-Man and Peter Parker's world, and J. Jonah Jameson. She's just involved a lot throughout many of the comics early on.
My number 2, they've been in issues appearing with Electro, the Goblin, the Sandman, twice with Doc Ock. They've been key factors in Goblin issues, Mysterio, the Vulture, and Kraven. Yet, again, much like Anna Watson, someone who people don't really take as seriously as a supporting character, but super important, I feel, is Dr. Nicholas Bromwell. Dr. Bromwell is always making house calls, again, taking care of Aunt May. This is not me being silly. I really believe so many times he's there to save her. If he's not there, Peter can't rush off and take care of his business. Dr. Bromwell is, not just a sponsor. He's a savior to Peter and to Aunt May. And I just don't think people realize how many times Aunt May's passing out and fainting, and Dr. Bramwell's there to keep her going so Peter can take care of business. So that's why for number 2, I have Dr. Bramwell. Steve, who do you have at number 2?
For number 2, I have Gwen. Gwen Stacy, the love of Peter's life, his first love. It's going to last forever. And she's just so pleasant always. And her dad's a cop. So Spider-Man's friends with him already.
Eddie, who do you got at your number 2 spot?
I said this in a silly way when we were talking last time, but I just went for it. I like anybody named Blackie in these early, 80 issues. We got Blackie Gaxton, we got Blackie Drago, we got 1 or 2 other criminals. Blackie, go get him. And I don't know why this name, I still can't figure out why this name keeps being used, but it's a funny shtick to me that hangs around. And whenever we hear that name, we know, this is some villain. Some villain's going to get, beat up here, or he's going to do something. So I know it's a wide net to cast, but any criminal or brother of Betty named Blackie.
Spider-Man needs someone to fight, and it's good that he knows the villains.
That's
just
right.
When he hears their name. Eddie, I'm going to actually let you do your number 1 right away here, because I know your Blackie is probably not your top supporting character. So who'd you have at the top?
My top supporting character was kind of easy for me. She had the longest run-up of mystery of any person or character in Spider-Man thus far, and I do really like her style and how she talks. Mary Jane Watson, she's a great character, a great foil for kind of like whenever there's an overly serious moment. I don't like how they kind of treat her like a bimbo oftentimes, but I think she can only improve from here, and I really look forward to reading more about Mary Jane.
Awesome. Steve, who'd you have at the top?
My number 1 is John Jameson, the son of Jonah Jameson. And basically because he's the opposite of his dad, he's actually a hero. He's been to space. And most importantly, he knows that Spider-Man is a hero.
I don't know how we managed to do this without any conversation. And it's true. We had you guys, right? Back me up. We didn't talk about this at all, right?
That's right.
Not at all.
But for us to pull off 9 different characters in our top spots,
wow.
I'm shocked.
Versatile.
For number 1, I had Harry Osborn. He is a roommate who doesn't charge Peter any rent.
Good point.
No tongue in cheek here for our friends over at the Multiverse of Badness, but he does take care of the women whenever Peter's unavailable.
Yep.
He keeps Peter from killing the Goblin. If Harry didn't have his father involved, that could have been the end of that. He's not a nosy roommate, which is good. But in all seriousness, he shows people can change, and he leads to getting Peter into the crowd. By accepting Peter, it brings along Gwen, it softens the blow with Flash, and it makes Peter part of a group rather than just being that outsider all the time. And it all happened when there was a moment where Harry was down about his dad, and Peter kind of took to him and started being nice to him. And 3 or 4 issues later, they're living together, and the whole situation changed. And I was surprised on thinking about this, but Harry Osborn, I feel, is to me the most important character. It's just funny that we all had one obvious, to cover Harry and Gwen and MJ, right?
On three different
on 3 different people's lists, and then to have those for me, I'm going to put in Dr. Bromwell, but to have Blackie and John Jameson as other people, they're all legit answers, but everyone had one kind of offbeat answer. You know what I mean? That was crazy.
Yeah.
And I really feel like mine are right. I'm I don't mind Betty Brant and Robbie. I really did consider Gwen even too, but after a while, it's wow, that was really good. And it's good to hear that you guys have those opinions. That shows the strong writing of the characters that we found so many supporting characters we liked.
So many characters in Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah, I had not considered Joe Robbie in that sense. I mean, I knew he was supportive of Spider-Man, and then you really point out Peter's never getting paid properly with the Daily Bugle, and like that is a big deal. It like shapes several comics. Like Aunt May Goes to Florida, and like that's a storyline that continues. And that's because of Joe Robbie. So that's a great point.
We also left some people off the list, obviously. Not many, right?
Right.
Not many. We didn't have Captain Stacy.
Oh.
We didn't have Liz Allen.
Right.
Liz Allen wasn't there.
Yep. Well, I was. What about Flash Thompson? Nobody.
I almost had Flash. Flash was almost there, but then I had Robbie, and I was like, I don't know, the former bully or the guy that's hooking up Peter now.
I don't think Flash Thompson adds any value to Peter's life at all through issue 79. You want to tell me why he should be even an honorable mention? I really don't think so, guys.
I had him in the running because, and you know, like when I had a struggle trying to think of like why I was going to pick the supporting character, quite honestly. Like I looked at it a little bit more of a perspective, like who I like to read about in the comic.
Okay, fair.
Flash for me, he's been around since the very beginning. You know, like Gwen just pointed that out recently, that like if you want to know something about Peter Parker or Spider-Man, Flash is going to know something about it. And although he's a Peter Parker hater, he's really been Spider-Man's #1 fan forever, right?
Yep.
So
yeah, that was his one. That was his one thing I thought about. But I just didn't think it was enough. When you brought up Betty Brant, I was thinking of her as the early romance. Do you recall when Peter makes his first real move? Not just I'm going to ask Liz Allen and she's going to reject me because she wants to go on a date with Spider-Man instead, but he puts a move on hiding in the Bugle while J. Jonah Jameson's like running around. Remember, he's sort of like
the desk scene.
being like
he's under the desk.
He's under the desk. He's being kind of a little aggressive with her, and it's like, you know, and she's like, "Oh, what are you talking about here?" Yeah. But
there's a great line there. I think it was something like, you know, "Cool it, baby, we're gonna be okay," or something like that. I'm like, "Oh, Peter, a slick line for Betty Brant."
right. So as long as he's not too dangerous, she'll be into him. All your characters, I thought of many of them. I think you guys did a great job, and thank you for the question, Steve.
Glad we had 9 different answers.
Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate you helping us shape the podcast and coming on today, because, you know, connecting to people like you is one of the reasons we do this podcast. We want to talk to people about Spider-Man and this early Spider-Man too, in particular.
And I definitely don't talk to enough people about Spider-Man, so this is awesome for me too.
Well, Steve, if people wanted to talk to you more about Spider-Man, how could they get a hold of you?
Well, they can find me on Twitter at SlimShady_EP.
Eddie tells me that's a Detroit reference.
It is.
Eddie, how could they find us?
You could find us at letsreadspiderman@gmail.com. You could write us an email there, or on Twitter at letsreadspidey.
And at this time, we're going to let our guest, Steve, take care of our close for us.
And remember, listeners, if you ever become a villain for a night and you're running a Spider-Man, he'll let you off the hook as long as you explain yourself.
Goodbye.
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 I think that was it. I think those are the only characters. I mean, the Human Torch doesn't count, right? I mean, I thought of Doc Connors for a moment. So.
Yeah, I almost had Doc Connors too, just because he helped Spider-Man out so many, like a few times, and he saved Aunt May's life with the ISO, whatever number that was, 30 something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because at least he's a reoccurring character like the Human Torch. What do you
Right.
Steve? Do you have any opinions of the Human Torch? He's in so many of the books.
I do not like the Human Torch. Every time he shows up, I just want him to go away. And he's like too strong, I feel like, to hang out with Spider-Man. Like I felt like the whole little the 2-part lizard story at the end, the lizard can just be dehydrated and defeated. Couldn't Human Torch just like put his flame on a little bit and make him heat up and dehydrate like immediately? I guess Spider-Man didn't tell him that. But yeah, I was kind of thinking that Spider-Man villains really don't fit for the Human Torch since he's like on fire. It just hurts people.